everyone. So we're letting more people in. We're so happy you're here. So greetings and thank you for joining us. So first things first, welcome to the developmental edge of facilitation. Holding space, holding power. And today's event is hosted by Shakti Shiva Academy. So you already met the principal of Shakti Shiva Academy, Rianne. So she's here letting people in as more people join us. And my name's Claire Rumore, and I'm here with my teaching partner, Marcia Bashinsky, and the two of us will be introducing ourselves more formally in just a minute. But as more people are joining, and we had over 650 people register for today, and so we're really excited that there's that much interest in this topic. And so we're happy that you all are the folks who are able to join us live and participate and contribute to this conversation. And so how we like to start at Shakti Shiva Academy is with the body and with embodiment. So if you will, just get comfortable wherever you are, whatever time of day it is. Get comfortable. We're going to take our bodies with us. And if it feels good to you to have your eyes closed, I welcome you to close your eyes, because the first place we're going to contact is inside. So take a moment to go inside. One of the essential skills or superpowers of an embodied facilitator is being able to track their own experience. And that experience is happening within, first and foremost. And the easiest access point to that internal experience is with the breath. So if it's comfortable for you to have your eyes closed, taking a deep breath in at your pace, and letting the exhale happen as is comfortable for you, whatever's natural. And doing another one of those in your own way. And now I'm going to give you a little hack for the breath for deep relaxation. So inhaling again, fully all the way. And then as you exhale, allow the exhale to come out of your mouth as if you're blowing through a straw, gently, all the way to the bottom of the exhale. So doing that again when you're ready, practicing that deep, deep exhale. All the way to the bottom of the exhale. And so feel free to keep practicing that as I bring your attention to the next place of awareness for the facilitator, which is your back body. And since we're all mostly sitting down, and most of us have our back against something, bring your attention to where your back is making contact with whatever your back is against. And placing your attention there, take note of the sensations. Take note of the texture of the feeling. Because our attention takes our presence to where we're directing our attention. So give your presence to your back body. And notice where your spine is this day, this time. And see if you can add relaxation to your spine, whether that's through straightening or curving. And bring the breath into that now. Yeah. And if your head wants to roll or your jaw wants to stretch, of course, bring that in. Our aim is to help settle the body. Because when you're facilitating, and probably many of you have experienced this, there can be jitters and nervousness. And so back body awareness, micro movements, and breath help the jitters to dissipate. And then our final place of attention is our feet. So take notice of where your feet are and the sensations that are touching the bottom of your feet, whether that's your shoes, whether that's socks, whether that's carpet or couch or air. Having the feet making contact gives us a sense of grounding. And so in this final moment, we'll coordinate these three parts. Attention on your feet, presence on your back body, and your breath. So take one moment to coordinate all of those, settling yourself, landing, and then on your next exhale, letting a sound come out that just grounds you and lands you. Yeah. So thank you for going on that little somatic journey with me, tracking breath, back body, and our feet. And we'll use those attention points again a little later. But first, we want to share with you what our aim is in our time together today. So our intention is that you will learn something new. Probably many of you are already facilitators, are leaders, are in the front of the room some way, somehow. So we're hoping that you will learn something new today about your role. And we want to give you an embodied experience, or at least point to that for you today. And we want to give you a little sneak peek into our year-long course about embodied facilitation, in case that calls to any of you. It's called The Fundamentals of Embodied Facilitation, and it starts in May, mid-May. And then we also want to answer your questions about facilitation and anything that we're talking about today, as well as the course. And we are almost at our 100-person max in this room, which is amazing. So we're really excited that there's interest in this conversation of power. So first, let me introduce myself, and then I'll have Marcia introduce herself. But my name is Claire Rumore. I'm an intimacy coach and erotic educator based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been doing this work for about 20 years, and I've been working closely with the Shakti Shiva Academy since, the early 2020s. Even before then, I was a senior student of the founder of the Shakti Shiva Academy, Shakti Milan. So I've been in this work since 2010 when I met her, the Shakti Shiva Academy approach of the work for a very long time. And it is thrilling to get to be here and to get to teach alongside a longtime friend and teaching co-facilitator, Marcia Bashinsky. So Marcia, let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see a lot of new faces and some familiar faces. So my name is Marcia Baczynski. I've been teaching facilitation now for almost 20 years, and so it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I've been doing a lot of work around touch, communication, boundaries, asking for what you want, all of those things in various forms for longer than 20 years. Including co-founding Cuddle Party. I wrote a book called Creating Consent Culture, a handbook for educators, and I teach at the School of Consent. I see some School of Consent folks here. Along with Shakti Shiva Academy, I also teach at the Esalen Institute, and I love facilitation. So I'm really excited to be here and to get into all of this with you all. Claire.
So we don't have time to find out who all of you are. We're just going to be feeling your energy with us. But I did want to invite, and since we are such a big group, we're going to use our chat today. But I wanted to invite you to share with us your response to this question. The question is, what drew you to this class? What had you join us today? So we're curious, what has brought you to this conversation about power? And if you would, if anyone's inspired to pop an answer in the chat, we'd love to just have a sense of what has inspired you to be part of today when we're talking about the developmental edge of facilitation. So fascination with the topic. Awesome. And this topic is so big, looking to bring more presence and groundedness, a refresher. Excellent. Going deeper into the work. Someone's now leading lots of groups, had a referral, and went to a retreat last year, and it was amazing. Sweet. So there's so many different reasons, so many different callings for what has inspired any of us to join today. And one of the reasons I'm very passionate about this topic is because, wow, these are great
These are
responses.
awesome.
Yeah, is because there are just so many examples of abuse of power all around us. And one of the most impactful ways that's going to change is that if each of us who is committed to integrity, to embodiment, to creating safe containers, actually makes that our ethos by learning about our own relationship to power and improving and empowering that, emboldening that in ourselves, then that's how we can also change the world, one small group facilitation at a time or one one-on-one session at a time. And I also like to say that facilitation skills are actually life skills. So, though maybe you're not teaching or facilitating in any big formal way right now, maybe that's not ever going to be part of your path, or so you think. But we're using facilitation skills, we're using those exact same life skills every single day. So, we're hoping that some of what we share with you today, you can apply into your life at a personal level, even if you don't bring it into a classroom or into a session space. And so, with that, and I'm just so grateful to see all these responses coming. Just to give you the lay of the land today, and then we're going to start diving into the teachings. But today we're going to cover talking about what facilitation is and also what it is not, because there are plenty of things that facilitation is not, and we want to make sure you know them. And then we also want to cover uh, what it can feel like in your body when you're embodied in your facilitation. So we're going to cover that today. We're obviously going to explore the three types of power and how they can impact facilitation and your facilitation. We're going to share some tips for what to do when you don't know what to do. And when you're in a facilitation moment and you feel frozen or stuck, we're going to give some pointers and some tips from our experience, but also some best practices from the field of facilitation. And then we'll share a little bit about our upcoming training and answer questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Marcia to start us with what exactly is facilitation.
Yeah, and just a couple of little accessibility notes and things. If you are finding the chat distracting, you can just X out of it. You don't have to pay attention to it. I will be keeping an eye on it. So if you do put something in there, I will hopefully see it, but there's enough of us that it's going pretty quickly. And then I see a question here about whether we're going to share the presentation. Yes, it's being recorded and the link will go out afterwards. So if you are wanting to rewatch it or share it with people, you're totally welcome to do that. And you'll get a follow-up email from everybody, from us with all this information. So yeah, thank you, Claire. So I want to start with talking a little bit about what even is facilitation. And the definition that I tend to use is that facilitation is really just the process of making something easier. And in the case of the work that we do, it's the process of making your participants' own experience more accessible to themselves. So facilitate, the root word means easy. So we're just trying to make something easier. And in the context of workshops and the kinds of workshops that we're teaching with embodiment, usually the thing we're trying to make easier is your students' ability to access whatever's going on for them. And there's some ways that we do that. Number one, designing and guiding the group process towards clarity, towards coherence, towards transformation. Um, it's also really important, number two, that we open, hold, and very importantly, close a clear container for people to do work inside of. A lot of people, when they facilitate, are really good at the opening and the holding, and sometimes not as great at closing for the participants or for themselves. And so it's really important that we open it for ourselves as facilitators, open the container for our students, hold that space clearly so people know where the edges and the boundaries are, and then close it for the students and then close it for ourselves. So that's another way that we make things easier. Um, a third way that we might do that is regulating the energy in a room. So regulating just is if things are starting to feel like they're kind of getting big and wild and spiraling in a direction, like, okay, how do we bring it back without being controlling or locking it down? How do we gently guide it? Or listen to where the group is really needing to go and maybe steer it in that direction. So that's one, those are different ways of regulating. Another way might be when things start to feel really slow and low in a way that is not where you were hoping things to go, often after lunch. How do you bring that energy back up? How do you bring it where people can stay in their learning zones, get access to what they're there to get access to? So regulating that energy as it sort of moves around. Um, a fourth thing is also making invisible dynamics visible. And sometimes that's for your students and sometimes that's for yourself. And we'll be touching on that a lot today. And then finally, tending to ourselves as we tend to the group. I would guess a lot of you are really good at putting your attention on other people. But one of the things I really believe is that we are only as good as facilitators as we can include ourselves in the people that we are tending to. So we want to be able, of course, to tend to our students, our participants, but can we also tend to ourselves so that we're not overstretching, overgiving, getting burnt out? And if we are doing that, it will often make everyone's experience a little bit easier, a little bit smoother. Maybe you've been in a workshop or a class where the teacher's clearly stressed out to be there, and maybe that affected your experience. So we'd like to avoid that with our students. So those are some things, that's what facilitation is, and those are some of the ways that we try to make that access to your students' experience a little bit more available to them. Some things that facilitation is not. It's not performing. Performing's wonderful when you're a performer and you're in a performance. But it's not performing a role. It's not performing a character. You're getting to being yourself. It's also not over functioning. When I was a baby facilitator, a lot of what I did in the room was try to compensate for what I thought was missing by over functioning. So that's not actually facilitation. That's a different thing. Facilitation is also not controlling the outcomes. And that's maybe one of the edgier pieces of facilitation is letting the outcomes go how the outcomes go without trying to control them. And a fourth thing that facilitation is not, fortunately, is having to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. You can facilitate an experience for people who know a lot more about the subject than you do. So it's not about knowledge, it's about your capacity to hold the space. It's about your ability to make what they are there to do more accessible to them. I don't have to know anything about engineering to be able to facilitate a meeting for engineers. It might be helpful if I know a little bit. But I don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room for people to get access to what they're there to get access to. Facilitation may or may not include teaching or coaching or participating. So often, like right now, I'm teaching and facilitating, right? Often teaching and facilitating will go hand in hand, but they're different skills and they require different knowledge. And there's lots of things that one could facilitate where you're not doing any teaching at all. Book clubs, movement experiences where you're all just doing the same thing. So we're trying to differentiate between being the knowledge holder and being the one who makes the experience more available, more accessible. Um, in the full course of embodied facilitation, we break facilitation into really specific trainable competencies. including one of my favorite modules is like an entire module on what is and is not your responsibility so that you can actually get really crystal clear about that. Um, and then practices that you can do throughout the year to play with facilitation in your life. So today we're just touching the surface on this stuff and kind of naming some of these distinctions. Obviously, we don't have time to go into all of it because that's why we created a year-long course. But yeah, so this is just a little bit of a taste of like, this is what facilitation is, this is what it's not, this is what it might be. And I'm going to hand it over to Claire to talk about what does it feel like to facilitate, Claire?
Thanks so much, Marcia. And so, one thing about facilitation is that it's a combination of thoughts because you're thinking about your content, you're delivering it, you're handling logistics. There's a lot of cognitive that goes into facilitation, but there's also a lot of feeling. You are feeling your own emotions about your experience. You're feeling the emotions in the space amongst your participants. You're tracking the room, you're tracking the environment. There's a lot going on. So I have sort of a trick question for you, or let's say a multi-layered question. And feel free to pop your responses into the chat. We'd love to see what your process is. The question is, when you think of facilitation, where do you feel it in your body? So when you think of facilitation, you might have to go inward. When you think of facilitation, where do you feel it in your body? So we have heart, more heart, womb and heart, gut, solar plexus, pelvis, throat, heart, hands, solar plexus, gut, stomach. So you can see this is a very bodied phenomenon, a bodied experience. Shoulders and thighs, nerves, gut, stomach, solar plexus. And it's great if it's mostly in the head. A lot of times that's where it's going to start until we start learning how to bring the body with us. And these are skills. Facilitation is ultimately a skill that's trained, as is the coordination of head and body. And so I want to share with you a little bit about the markers of embodied facilitation. So when we're talking about embodied facilitation, what exactly do we mean? And these are the core markers. It can look and be experienced in other ways, but these tend to be the starting places. And they kind of go back to what we began the session with when we had our breath, we had our back body awareness, we had our feet. So the markers of embodied facilitation include grounding. So noticing your feet on the ground and lower body stability if you're standing. So grounding is one of the markers of embodied facilitation. If somebody is nervously pacing or wobbling around or wiggling or doing excessive movement, they don't feel grounded. And so grounding is one of those markers. Next is awareness of your center. So being centered. Somatically, that happens with core engagement, back body awareness. So knowing where you are in space and time. A somatic term for that is proprioception. And then having capacity with your breath. So being able to speed up and slow down based on how you are moving air through your system. So awareness of breath is in that. And then a third marker is relational field awareness. So right now, as I'm aware of my body on the seat, breath, the room that I'm in, I'm also tracking all of you who I can see and the rest of you who I can feel energetically. And so that's the relational field awareness. And a lot of the times, if you're in a public setting, if you're in person, that is including peripheral sensing. So your senses are going out beyond just facing forward and delivering content from a cognitive place. So I'm tracking around me, even behind me where I can't see with my eyes, as well as what's in front. So that's relational field awareness through peripheral sensing. And then another marker is capacity to tolerate activation without collapsing or dominating. because a lot of what's going to happen when you're facilitating is things you have no control over. And some of those will be activating and even triggering. And so your capacity to tolerate activations in your nervous system will help guide the group's collective nervous system. So again, this is why embodied facilitation is incredibly important, because there's nothing, well, in my experience, there's very little that is more disconcerting or more activating than a facilitator who is not acknowledging something that's happening in the space that's affecting and impacting the experience of the group because they're so busy on delivering content. So again, this is a holistic experience when we're bringing the head, the heart, the body. So let me review those markers with you really fast. The ground or grounding, so the stability in the lower body. A sense of being centered. So breath helps with this. Core activation, back body awareness. Relational field awareness is another marker. So someone who's tracking the space, even if it's the Zoom room, tracking the Zoom room or the field around them. And then the capacity to tolerate activation without collapsing, like, oh God, I don't know what to do, or dominating, becoming forceful in the space. So collapsed leadership, and a collapsed facilitator could look like someone who has their eyes down. They're not really present with you. You don't really feel them. Their voice might be thin or softer. And so there's just this sense of self-consciousness, a little bit hard for me to demonstrate through a Zoom block, but I'm sure you've seen it. Someone who's just collapsed. You don't feel them. They're not in their whole body being. But then dominating leadership, when somebody's dominating, you might feel that their jaw is tight, their chest is forward. You can kind of feel they're pushing or forcing their agenda on the space. They're trying to grab for control for the reasons that they are. But it might just not, well, a lot of times it just does not feel good as a participant when you're in that kind of facilitated space. But embodied facilitation, it's grounded, it's responsive instead of reactive, and it's spacious. It's not tense and tight and trying to make a thing happen. It's with the breath, with the body relaxed, even if things are tense. And this, again, is a trained skill. It's something that requires practice in real life experience. And so it's important to first get the concept, to understand the concept. But in the year-long training, we work with practices specifically designed to help build these capacities in our participants and build them over time. It's not meant to be a performance, but it's nervous system training. And one of my interests is Formula One. I really like Formula One racing. And I just think a lot about the drivers and the training, because that's not something you can just get into an F1 car and practice every day for the fun of it. Just like you can't just hop in front of whatever group just happens to, whatever people happen to be gathered and practice facilitation. So a lot of times there's practicing on your own and then imagining an experience. So if you will, and if it's comfortable for you to close your eyes, we're just going to do a brief imagined scenario. Imagining that you're at the front of a room, whether that's a meeting, a class you're teaching, a group you're leading, a book club, maybe it's just a one-on-one session. And think about how you normally feel in those experiences. Maybe you're already starting to embody and already have a facility with this. But imagine yourself in that scenario, that is your scenario. And now bring into it these embodied markers that you're grounded. What does that feel like in your body? You're aware of your feet, the bottoms of your feet making contact with whatever they're touching. That brings you into this present space and time. You're aware of your core. Is your core tight? Can you relax it? Can you use your breath, that full inhale and that complete exhale, even gently blowing out your breath like through a straw, gently, and using that technique to calm your nervous system, to deactivate any kind of activation that might be up. Can you imagine yourself tracking the entire room, meaning as many of your participants as you can see, with soft vision, not piercing gaze? You're aware of things such as temperature, sounds in the room. You're aware of any sort of ripple in the emotional field, the relational field. And then you're aware of your body's responses to all the stimuli. So imagine in this scenario, just weaving all of that together so that your head, your heart, and your body are fully with you as you're fully with whoever's in front of you. And in your own time, just taking a breath and letting that imagined scenario go, planting a seed for the future, that whatever the skills are that you need to hone and want to sharpen for yourself, that the seeds get planted for that to happen. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Marcia because now we're ready to talk about power.
Thank you, Claire. That was lovely. Mm. So I want to shift gears now into talking about power and how we use it. And we do actually have a little slideshow for this one. So please wait while I get that started here. Sometimes facilitation includes tech skills. So this is a framework that I was inspired by the Right Use of Power Institute, and I found it incredibly helpful for thinking about it in terms of facilitation and in life. And we've put, of course, our own spin on it and applied it very specifically to facilitation. And the first thing I want to say about power is that it can bring up a lot of feelings for people to even talk about it. And a lot of us have experienced abuse of power, and it's very common to conflate the experience of abuse of power with power itself. But they're not the same thing. Power dynamics are inherent to all human relationships. Power is simply the ability to control or to influence what happens. And so we all have capacity to control and influence things, and other people have capacity and ability to influence things. So it's always present in relationships, and the existence of power itself is neutral. It's how it's used that affects whether the experience is a positive one or a negative one. How it's used is where empowerment happens or where harm occurs. So but because so many of us have a hard time talking about it, it's really easy to not notice that power is flowing. And so our job as facilitators is to be as aware as we can. Of course, we don't always know everything, but to be as aware as we can of how power is flowing in a group so that we can use it responsibly. So what are these? Where is this power? What is this power? What does it look like? Well, the first is role power. This is the power the influence that you hold simply because you're the facilitator. You walk into the room, they look at you to know what's going on. You standing in front of the room, you know what the agenda is, you know how the time is going to go. You know what's on the docket for the day. You know when the breaks are going to be. This is all kinds of power. You're able to affect, control, and influence things, right? So people will defer to you automatically due to your role when you are in the facilitator role. The second is personal power. So this is unique to you. You have a presence. The way your voice lands with people, how calm you are, your charisma, your confidence. There's a million other things that could go on this list. But there's sort of just the way that you are outside of your role or outside of the third thing we're about to talk about, that is just you. And those influence people. And some people might be indifferent to those qualities in you. Other people might be quite enthralled with those qualities that you have. And this is one that is often hardest for us to see because you're just, living your life doing you. But you are also moving through the world, affecting the people around you by your mood, by the tone of voice you use, whether you snap at people or are patient. Your just way of being is a type of power. And then the third kind is social power. So this is about where you sit within cultural hierarchies. This is about race and class and gender and what language you speak and whether you are a documented person in your country and whether you have access to wealth and, all of these kinds of things, disability. Every culture has hierarchies, and some of those are more extreme than others, depending on where you're at. But you sit somewhere in those social hierarchies, and the people you work with sit somewhere in those social hierarchies. And this is about how people perceive you before you even open your mouth. It is also about how you perceive your students before they ever open their mouth, the assumptions that we bring and the expectations that we have. And so when we're a facilitator, we're going to be looking at all three of these things and learning how to just track it, notice how it flows, notice where we get, like, where do you get really uncomfortable? Or where do you feel confident or comfortable using power responsibly? Where do you contract? Where do you overcompensate? And all of this is a lifelong practice in my experience. I mean, I've been working with this stuff for 20 years and I'm still learning plenty about it. Um, and the reason this is important is that unconscious power leaks undermine your students' learning. It undermines their ability to access their experience. If there's something going on in the room and one student just keeps talking over another, or one person sort of assumes that they can't speak up, or one student is deferring to you to the point that they can't pay attention to their own boundaries and limits and are just going along with whatever you say, or any of a million other examples, it's going to undermine their ability to access their experience and to learn, which is what they're there to do. And when you don't have awareness of your own power, particularly your role power, but this is kind of true for all three, but with role power in particular, it tends to swing in one of two directions, which Claire already kind of alluded to. So when we overuse that power, like I'm the facilitator and how it goes is how it goes, you get controlling, you might direct things too tightly, you might not be comfortable with silence, right? It's like, no, I gotta steer it, I gotta make it go. I'm in charge. And that may be an anxiety in your part, or it might be about performing, trying to perform, or feeling scared to let things unfold, right? So there's a lot of ways we can overuse our role power in particular as a facilitator. But we can also underuse it. And I see a lot of facilitators, especially new facilitators, really underuse their power. They're vague in the instructions or in how the class is set up, or they're overly accommodating, trying to make everybody happy or trying to respond to every critique or their boundaries are unclear. This is where a lot of burnout occurs. And so, and also when people are like, when a facilitator is like, I don't want to hold power, when they're nervous to hold power, these are some of the things that can happen. In an attempt to not be overusing, you might underuse. In an attempt to not be abusing power, we are afraid to use it. And so these are some of the things that can happen. And they're both problems. It's not an out to just say, well, I just won't be in charge. Not when you're in front of the room. It doesn't work that way. So we have to learn how power works, explore our comfort with it, and and continue to get support, learning how to use it responsibly in order to not fall into either of these two traps. So as part of the power thing, when you're facilitating, especially from an embodied place, you're paying attention to all the intellectual components, but you're also noticing what you're feeling, and you're paying attention to other people's bodies also. And we don't always know what's going on for them, but we can also notice things like tightness in the jaw, restricted breathing in our students. And we track things like who's speaking, who's silent. We can make up stories about why that is. And I try to avoid making up stories, but to track that and then to get curious. Why is this person speaking? Why is this person silent? And we in the embodied facilitation training, we talk about what to do with that information. But these are some of the things that as you're tracking power dynamics and you're paying attention, like what are we looking for? We're also noticing where tension is accumulating in our bodies. We're noticing where tension is happening between a student and us. Maybe you're really reactive to somebody in your class, you don't like them, or they're challenging you and you feel some kind of way about it. Or there's tension happening between students. Or you're just noticing that somebody's demeanor has shifted from how they were earlier. And it seems like maybe their body is more rigid or tight in some way. So these are all, there's self, there's dynamics, and then there's other. And as embodied facilitators, we're tracking all of that. Again, we're tracking how the power flows, and we're looking at who's charismatic in the room, who does everybody just seem to like. We're also looking at or who does everybody seem to not automatically like. What's that about? Do you need to intervene? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what you're doing. But also things like who, how does the structural power work? Like that social power of, well, the people who are accorded a lot of space to make mistakes seem to be in daily life because they tend to have more access to power in daily life. Do they just get to do that in your classroom too? And if you're working with bodies, a question I often think about is who gets to learn, who gets to use their body to learn, and whose bodies out in the world tend to get learned on. And that's a really important question to look at when we're looking at how power flows in the room. And what I mean by that is often, for example, women's bodies get learned on so that men can learn. And I'm not trying to make this a gender thing, it's just how that often plays out, right? Or people with disabilities get learned on. Everybody gets to have a learning experience. But is that disabled person actually getting to have their experience? And it plays out along racial lines, physical size, all kinds of things. So noticing that, not trying to control it, not trying to compensate for it, but also being mindful of where can you add a support? Where can you make somebody who is very comfortable, maybe a little more uncomfortable to learn, to get access to their experience? So these are all things that you're tracking. And then also when there's something happening in the room and it's maybe everybody's having a good time, but you notice that, oh, somebody isn't, or there's a topic that gets brought up and it's brought up in a way that it's clear it's jarring for somebody. So when does the field need interruption? When do we need to interrupt for justice? When do we need to interrupt for a pause? When do we need to interrupt? Because it's like everybody, it's like it's a big good time, but somebody's being left behind. So these are all skills that we get to develop together. And these are skills that as you get more embodied and as you have more practice facilitating, you'll get much better at doing all of this stuff at once, which is really honestly quite a challenge. So, stop the share.
And real
Let's
fast,
see.
Marcia, there was a quick
Yeah.
question in the chat. What is meant by the field in the last one or the whole of the event?
Yeah, thanks for that. So the field is a term that I sometimes use to just mean like the overall dynamic or the sort of phenomena that's happening in the room. So when you get a group of people together, like we're all together right now, and also, by the way, I love it when people interrupt me to ask for definitions of words. So thank you, whoever asked for that. There's 100 or so folks in here, right? I'm noticing when I can look at the screen, I'm noticing like what's going on. I'm sort of paying attention to what's happening in the chat. And I'm also sort of trying to like keep track of the whole dynamic. And so the whole dynamic is what I mean when I say the field. I think other people might use it in other ways, but that's how I use it. Yeah. Claire, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that covers pretty good territory. And then, well, there was one additional question I want to make sure we give. We've got a
Yeah,
couple.
what you got?
Yeah. So, can you say more about bodies being learned on and bodies learned, and similarly, can you give an actual example of a body getting learned on?
Yeah, so I started a lot of my facilitation doing cuddle parties. I was the co-founder of Cuddle Party, and it's a non-sexual event where we get people together. We do about an hour-long workshop where we communicate. We talk about communication, asking for what you want, saying no, changing your mind, and then people get to go cuddle. That's the whole point. And some people are there to practice asking, and some people are there to practice saying no, and some people are there just to cuddle and have a nap or have a little cozy moment. So some people are there for the touch needs, some people are there for the communication needs or lessons. And something that it took me a little while to figure out what was happening is that established dynamics about asking and about saying no in sort of the broader world always came into the room. And so what would happen often is a man would ask a woman to cuddle, whatever, and she may be there to practice asking herself, but she'll just fall into that pattern because it's a pattern that already exists that we're all used to. Like we're all used to going along with things. And in that case, she would be sort of falling into, so her learning would get set to the wayside and she would just fall into the thing that the man would ask for. And this is again, not every man, not every woman. It was just a very common phenomenon that I saw. And then what would happen is that, he was there for whatever experience he was there for, and she was there for whatever experience she was there for. And I, as a baby facilitator, didn't yet know that it was a good idea to sometimes just go in and check and be like, hi, is everybody here getting what they want? And in the absence of that, what would often happen at the end or like partway through, or maybe I'd have a conversation during the event or after the fact, I would find out, oh, she was actually here to practice asking and she just wasn't doing it because her body was now being used in this other, not used, but like it was being learned on. Like he was learning and she wasn't. She wasn't getting access to her experience. So that was like that was a very common one for me when I first started facilitating, where I was like, oh, I don't need to change or interrupt anything that's necessarily happening from the get-go, because sometimes it's useful for people to see those established patterns. But it is useful for me to know as a facilitator that this is a thing that's likely to come up in my spaces, in that particular space. And in knowing that, then I can do skillful interventions and check in and say, hey, are you getting what you want? Remember, you can change your mind. If you're here to practice asking, make sure you're asking for some things, things like that, so it's not just falling into the patterns that the dominant culture outside of the workshop space is happening. Because a lot of the time, the reason we are stepping into workshop spaces is to practice doing something differently than we normally do it. But these social patterns are so ingrained in us, including us as facilitators, that we don't even notice that it's happening. Does that make sense? Is that a useful example? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Yeah, and then Ness says a marginalized person having to explain their disprivileges to a privileged person who had no idea. That's a very common example. Um, that kind of thing. But just sort of just knowing all of these things, it's like who who is having the same experience they often have outside of the space versus being able to have a different kind of experience in your space. Super. Okay. Um, let's do a little breakout group. Claire, are we ready for that? Okay. So we're going to break out for a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes into triads. And the question that we want to explore is for you to explore with each other in your little triads. Are we going to go 10 minutes or is it 7 minutes?
Right at 10.
Right at 10 minutes. Okay. How do you feel about holding power? And are you more likely to fall into overusing it, underusing it, or something else? So those are the questions. Claire put them in the chat. And then Claire's going to break us out into
Groups of
uh,
three. So
groups of
there's
three.
one group of four, and we figure if somebody's not able to participate, at least hopefully two people will be in the room. And so we're going to give you 10 minutes. About 1 minute is to get oriented, and then 3 minutes each, if you will. And we will send a little note into the rooms so you know when to switch. And also have fun getting to know each other. You're in this big group of 100 amazing people interested in this topic. So dive deep and see what comes through.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us as we navigated the technology. And I hope that was a useful little snapshot of a moment of a reflection. Super. Oh, yay. Wonderful. You're glad to see this, some folks enjoyed that. I hope that was thought-provoking, useful, insightful in some way. So, um, in the year-long course, we spend an entire module on power mapping, integrity, and ethical repair because these are all skills you need as a facilitator. It is inevitable that you will mess these things up. That's just part of being human. That's not a problem. It's about how do you correct and repair and like make things whole again. And we have a lot of material on that in the year-long course. So if you found that useful and enjoyable, or at least insightful, there's more where that came from. Yeah, wonderful, lovely, great. All right, Claire, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. So we're going to move through this last part a little fast so we can get to conversations, questions, and sharing more with you about some opportunities. But next is what to do when you don't know what to do, because that's inevitably going to happen. And in the year-long course, we share 14 different ways to approach that kind of dilemma. But today we're going to share with you 4 of them. So take note. These might get you out of sticky situations at some points. So one of the first things to do when you don't know what to do is slow the room down. And so that first starts with slowing your own physiology down, because as we get hyped up, we become less and less effective. I'm sure you've seen it when you're nervous and anxious and feeling a bit out of control. That's not the best state to be in when there's a crisis or even when there's a mild disrupt. So first things first, slow the room down. Take a moment, even of silence. Silence is not failure. It creates space for integration first inside yourself. So slow the room down. A second thing you can do when you don't know what to do is name what you notice. You could say something like, I'm sensing contraction in the room. I'm sensing that there's tension that just came up. Am I misreading that? So there's different ways you can name what you're noticing. And in that way, the people who are affected feel seen. And also the group feels seen, because if there's something obvious in the group field that's uncomfortable, then that you named it really demonstrates your competence, yes, as a facilitator, but also your care and your compassion. You're acknowledging we're in this together. So name what you notice. A third approach, return to structure. Yeah, so Marcia's sharing these in the chat. Return to structure. So you, in those moments of not knowing what to do, if it's useful, you can re-anchor to the agreements of the space, of the container, of the event, or re-anchor to the purpose of why we're here. So like the conversation or the chat goes off into a tangent, maybe a participant's co-opting the space, you can return the group, re-anchor the group in the purpose of our time together, of the time together, and return to structure. So that helps tonify the situation. And then a fourth best practice that you can keep in your back pocket for situations like these is to regulate yourself first. So this, in effect, is like putting on your own oxygen mask first, because the group is going to be responding to your nervous system. And if your nervous system is agitated, is fritzy, is freaked out, well, the group is not going to know that there's any other way to feel, because if the pilot of the plane is freaking out, all the passengers on the plane are likely to freak out too. So first things first, regulate yourself. And that goes for if you're in an argument with a loved one, if there's tension that comes, regulate yourself first. If you get into a little friction while waiting in line at the grocery store, regulate yourself first, because that helps. It helps to provide a level of care to the relational field, and you get to be the source of that. So that initiates that healing process. So we don't quite have time for the full exploration of this, but if you're willing to share in the chat, because a lot of times what to do when you don't know what to do, that's sourced in fears that we can have as facilitators and leaders at the front of the room, because any number of wacky things could come up at any point. And a lot of people don't go into facilitation because they're afraid of these ghosts, these little scary things. And just to clarify for the question that's in the chat, it's not flow the room down, it's slow the room down. My lazy mouth, slow the room down. Yes, and notice when you need to self-regulate that. It can be tricky for those who are on the spectrum, as the comment is saying. So again, self-care is essential, pre-care and post-care, as well as self-care throughout the event. So question for you, if you're willing to share in the chat, because I think this helps normalize fears for all of us. But what's a facilitation fear that you carry? What's a facilitation fear that you carry? A fear I carry is I'm going to teach a dance class and I cannot get the speaker to work with the sound system. And I'm not about to play on my playlist off of my phone for 50 people. So that's a fear I have. What's an example of a fear that you have? Yeah, being exposed for not knowing everything, being unprepared. Pre-care and post-care, yes. Not having the answer is a fear. We won't finish the project together on time. Participants not being able to integrate when leaving the space. Absolutely. Won't know what to do. That I missed someone in the room who has a need and I did not notice. God, these are good. Not being able to tend to everyone, which you never will be able to. And again, that's not your responsibility. We talk more about that in the course, how to create safety. All the same, I'll be seen as a fraud, a waste of time and space. They won't take me seriously or respect me, not having an answer or having a technical issue, having a stickler in the audience, having that little heckler person, not having a microphone because you speak softly, that dominant heckler. If participants don't think the session was valuable or worth it, golly, just see how many of these fears are relatable. I can relate to pretty much every single one of them. So yeah, thank you for that. The most important thing you can bring to your participants is not having all the answers, is not doing everything perfectly, is not having everything figured out. It's bringing a calm nervous system. Even if you're unprepared, even if the speakers aren't working, even if participants might leave thinking that it wasn't worth it, you having a calm nervous system is what will save the day and get you through the experience to land the plane. And so in our year-long course, we actually have an entire module dedicated to the SOS fears, what to do when things go sideways. because as any experienced facilitator knows, things will eventually go sideways at some point. So we want to help prepare you for those. So you've got some backup plans in your pocket. And yeah. So Marcia, should we take the question? I think Vanessa, you had a question. Oh, you're muted, Marcia.
Yeah, it's your time, Claire, so I'll let you
Yep, I'm
decide.
at the end of my little part. So Vanessa, did you
Okay.
have a question?
I would, yes.
Please.
Um, Thank you. There's a great so like let's say last time I facilitated, I was leading a meditation and it's once a week. And I thought it was going well. I thought it had went well. And then the week after, when the other facilitator was leading, like the room was more like engaged, alive. People were like their bodies were moving more, like they seemed to be interacting more. So I kind of realized the room I had been leading, they were kind of frozen, probably dissociated, like from myself or from themselves. And like once in a while that kind of happens, and I think it's a certain kind of crowd also. But like the thing with that is like even if I self-regulate or like I'm like or if I come back to structure or like and you're like oh hey what do you guys need now or like oh was everything all right or do you have a question or like is there a need or like these people they will stay in their dissociation and I don't that's the only thing that I can't handle. I can handle everything like hecklers, I can handle like low energy, I can adapt the material. I but like a frozen this room of like dissociated people and you're like no, carry on, it's fine. Oh, it was good. Like I have no idea what's going on in their heads. And like it's
Mhm.
not even like they're upset at me. Like I have no clue. I have no data.
Yeah.
Marcia,
Anybody else have that fear? Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, you're not alone in that. I mean, what to do with it, we only have a few minutes, so we probably can't actually get into that right now. But I will say that the other, there's 10 more go-tos that we have. And also part of what we look at in the training is what is and is not your responsibility, and also how do you add support to your students when it's outside the scope of what you can offer them, because sometimes people come into workshops and it's too much for them. Their nervous systems can't handle. They thought they could and they can't for whatever reason. It's not a bad thing, it's just what's happening. So we do go into that quite a bit in the training, and sometimes things really go sideways. And then that's also where repair comes in. So the more training and the more skill you develop, and a lot of this is as you go, both in teaching and in taking various trainings, including ours, um, the more you'll be able to meet that gracefully. And part of meeting it gracefully is knowing, is what's happening in the sphere of your responsibility? Is this in your lane even? Because I've definitely had participants come to some of my workshops and be so far out of their depth that it was very clear that my job was just to get them to a safe person who could actually support them. And that's sometimes what's true. And so being crystal clear about what your responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are not is part of it. And then there's a bunch of other skills on like how do you actually transport that person literally or metaphorically to the next safe space for them. But
Mhm.
it is useful to remember, I will just say this for everybody, it's useful to remember that just because somebody is in your room does not mean you are now responsible for them.
So warped sense of responsibility in maybe in my case.
Potentially.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll bring that in my toolbox. Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions. And these ones in the chat are fantastic. And one of the things I'm very pleased is that we have built a lot of the answers to these and tools for these and the skills for these into the training. So that's, as a facilitator, I find that reassuring. Okay, Claire, I hand it back to
Right
you.
on. Well, as we are turning the corner, the last 15 minutes of our time together, we do want to share with you a little bit about the training that's coming up, but I'm not going to do that right this second. What I'm going to do right now, and Marcia, if you will put slide up for us,
I sure will. Hang on a second.
is to share with you, there we go. What exactly is the cost of not learning how to do embodied facilitation? So maybe you've captured from our time together so far a few of the things that often happen when a facilitator let's say, has more space to grow into, but doesn't choose to explore that, is first off, facilitators can burn out. So a lot of times facilitators rely on efforting, on control, on overworking and overmanaging a room, taking way too much responsibility for what's happening in the space and with their participants, and ultimately they exhaust themselves. So with embodied facilitation, we aim to teach, or embodied facilitation teaches regulation. It also teaches shared responsibility, how you don't have to take responsibility for absolutely everyone and everything in your space, because the facilitator actually isn't carrying the whole room alone and is never meant to. So embodied facilitation helps facilitators not burn out. Now, another thing that can happen without embodied facilitation is that groups can fracture. So, humans, we're messy. When we come together, all manner of drama can occur, and tension, disagreement, emotional charge can all come up. But if a facilitator doesn't know how to track and respond to dynamics like that, then those little small ruptures can actually grow into polarization or disengagement. And so our aim is to help you avoid that in the groups and the experiences that you're facilitating. Now, a third thing that can happen is that harm goes unnamed. And we didn't get to speak too much about harm specifically, but obviously misuses of power create harm. That just goes without saying. But this harm can actually be an element that rots an experience. It can create devastation in a group. So for example, when harm isn't acknowledged, participants often carry it silently and might even leave the space or the group altogether. So part of our aim is to give you skills, help you sharpen the skills of repair and reconciliation and acknowledgement to help harm not be destructive. And now, without embodied facilitation and this awareness of those three types of power that we taught today, then power can easily but accidentally get misused. Oftentimes, a misuse of power is unintentional, but simply because the dynamics aren't visible to the facilitator, if they don't know what to look for in terms of how they hold power and have power, and then how how power is roaming in the group and happening in the group. And then finally, brilliant content fails. So embodied facilitation helps to strengthen the container that we're creating so people can actually absorb and work with the content being offered. And so next slide, Marcia. Great. So what we want to point to is that it's the capacity to hold the human dynamics that emerge whenever people gather. That is your role as a facilitator. And the transformation we hope to guide you on is this. We hope to help you shift from being reactive, which means reacting to a stimulus or to a thing happening in your room, and your nervous system is in reaction. We want to help you shift over to regulation, that you can regulate your nervous system, because a regulated facilitator can stay grounded, even if the room becomes emotionally activated. And that steadiness is what signals safety ultimately to the group. And it allows the facilitator to respond thoughtfully instead of reflexively or reactively to what's occurring. And then Marcia mentioned early on, facilitation is not performance. Performance is performance. But what facilitation and embodied facilitation is about is staying present. Even if all hell's breaking loose, how can you stay present? Because presence shifts attention. So if attention is shifting to chaos or a drama happening in the room, your presence can help shift the attention back to the purpose of the gathering, to the structure of the event. And so in that way, when you're present rather than performing, your participants will relax and actually engage more authentically because they'll feel safe to do that you're not going into performance, so they don't need to go into performance. And then a third transformation is shifting from being controlling in the space and trying to wrangle the space to being co-creative. With co-creative facilitation, it still includes structure and leadership, of course, because you want to have a toned container, but it allows the group to also influence the direction of the work and of the event. And then finally shifting from what maybe some of us or many of us could relate to being intuitive but inconsistent with our facilitation to actually being skillful and repeatable in a way that matches your style. So training translates intuitive abilities into clear skills, such as tracking the room, tracking your own nervous system and regulating it, naming dynamics in the room, repairing ruptures. These are some of the skills that we teach in the course. And so when these abilities actually become practiced skills, repeatable skills, then you as a facilitator can absolutely rely on them, even if your room of participants becomes complex or unpredictable. You know how to surf it. You know how to navigate. And so it felt important to highlight, like, why spend time and money on a training about facilitation? Maybe you feel comfortable enough in the front of the room, it's not a big deal. And that may be true too. And we wanted to highlight what is at stake and what's the transformation that's possible. You can consider those. And so we've got a year-long training. Marcia, is there something else you wanted to say or add?
Oh, I just wanted to say too, going back to the previous slide, one of the things that I love so much about this course is that this process of moving from reactive to regulated, performative to present, controlling to co-creative, intuitive but inconsistent to skillful and repeatable, all of that sort of this lovely side effect that seems to happen with this course is there's this deep self-compassion that starts to emerge as we all spend time in a year together kind of grappling with the issues that come up and recognize just the fullness of the humanity that is on display in any room that you're facilitating. And I just think it's just such a lovely side effect of the course. Like, these are the benefits I certainly want you to all get. And there's this like really lovely thing that happens of just sort of being a lot easier on yourself and easier on your students. So yeah, that's all.
Love that. Here's a QR code that takes you to more information about the course. The course is starting May 12th. And just in brief, because this course is chock full of value and really cool bonuses, masterclasses. But how we designed it is that there are 9 modules spread out over 12 months. So the course is divided into trimesters with a month in between each trimester for a pause, for time to catch up on reading and assignments and rewatching classes. Everything's recorded, so if you can't attend live, you'll have all of the recordings of the classes. You'll have the PDFs of the modules to read. You will also have audio forms of the modules if you're a learning an auditory listener. So that's all there. And then there's also, I believe, 7 master classes. We've kind of gone above and beyond. Usually we do 3.
Really great.
So many wonderful facilitators for us to learn from. And so, Marcia, if you want to show that really fast. I wish we could offer a certificate for today. That would be amazing. Today's just a little taster. Oh, gosh. But yeah, if you could get to, there we go. So we're going to be learning about from some folks who've had decades of experience with facilitation. So Dan Brule is a breathwork master and has been facilitating all over the world for many, many years. And then Jeremy Datali is a public speaker who is a phenomenal, he has so much knowledge and expertise with the voice and how you speak and have presence. So I'm personally very excited about this class. And then the next one. So mediation and restorative justice and repair are hugely important when it comes to repairs that might happen in your facilitation. Nothing's ever intended to happen when we run into harm, but we feel it's important to look at the restoration process, the repair process through a deep lens, a very careful lens, so we can approach our work with more trauma-informed background. And then Z Grease is one of mine, Marcia's colleagues here in California, who is very devoted to social justice, awareness of the intersections of power. And so we're going to look at how the caste system, what Z refers to as the caste system, and through the resources they'll be bringing in, can affect facilitation. but we can move to liberation. And then Jared Lim is amazing. He's a coach I've worked with, and others I've worked with in terms of business. And so how do you set yourself up to win when you are a facilitator and maybe you are self-employed? What's the roadmap for financial solvency that aligns with your values and grows your income? So it's exciting to have Jared join us. And then we've got Marcia, who's going to be talking about marketing marketing that works and actually feels good. Because if you're anything like me, marketing is the harder part because it can just feel so icky when I'm not in line with the channels that actually are my channels. So Marcia's going to be talking about that. So lots to explore. And also, we've got one more slide for you.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
And the last thing we'll say about all this is we're going to be sending a follow-up email. So all the details will be in the follow-up emails as well as the recording of today's class. So you can have all of that at your fingertips. So here's the QR code. And then today is, because we love celebrating the folks who join us live. So we do have a super early bird rate. It's quite a significant discount that's available for a few days, just for the next 5 days. And all the info will be in the email that will follow up with you. But we do have that special enrollment offer for you. So,
Yeah, get those
yay.
coupon codes, get that discount.
Exactly, because we would love to have any of you join us. So enough of the sales overview. We want to open the conversation up in these last few minutes for any questions you might have from today's content, or about the course, or about me or Marcia, Shakti Shiva Academy. Just what's up, what's brewing for you after these big conversations today. We're so grateful to have had you all join us to get to talk about these things. How are you feeling about your relationship to power now, or at least an understanding of power? Did you learn something new? Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free, you can come on live now.
So I see a few questions in the chat. There's a question about we get reading. Yes, we get you get plenty of reading in the course. There's lots of the modules have a lot of written material and references to support that. One question that came in, would you recommend working with a co-facilitator to empower self and participants who are not receiving or engaging in this space? I think that might have been in reference to the earlier questions. So we will try to stick to the course questions. Is there a way to take the course in a short space of time, at least a few months, not a year? This is a great question. When we first put this together, we did discuss whether we wanted this to be a shorter training, and I have actually taught shorter trainings. And the way that this course is structured, because there's so much material, not everybody has a chance to practice it facilitating in front of a group, but we often do have opportunities to practice the skills in our lives. We've built it so that you can actually learn something and then go practice it and then come back. So it doesn't, I suppose we could do it that way, but we don't have it structured that way. And that's intentional because we really want you to have time to practice the skills in an embodied way and not just have it be heady theoretical stuff. Let's see, other questions in the chat. What materials are required to have for the course? I think, yeah, like, so it's email, it's Zoom, and we're on Mighty Networks, so you need an internet connection. And then one of the questions, yeah, I think that's the materials. You need a computer, you need internet connection, you need email address. Will there be any live in-person component similar to FOF at some later date? FOF is the cuddle party training. Yes, there is a retreat that's optional is it April of 2027 in South Africa?
April 7th to the 14th,
Thank you.
2027.
April 7th to the 14th in South Africa. That is optional, but it will be an opportunity to come in person and really practice these skills in an in-depth way. Is there an application process, and how are you building the group for the year-long training, and what other kinds of people might be peer participants? So Rianne, you can schedule a call with Rianne. She's doing calls with almost everybody who's coming to the training. And there's an application that you fill out. So it's a brief application. In terms of the other people who are in the group, of course, every group is unique and different, but we expect this to be quite a number of dance people, consent educators, sex educators, both somatic and classroom teaching, movement of various kinds, tantra. Last class was really global. It was people from all over the world. I expect this one will also be quite international. Claire, can you speak to anything else around that?
I say look around this room right now because we have a
Yeah.
diversity of people. I'm trying to remember. I think we had 10 or 12 countries represented, maybe up to 15 last time in the last cohort.
Hmm.
And there's not really a group size maximum. It's really who is called to join. And we do a little bit of vetting, mostly around the investment of time and resource, making sure it's an absolute fit because it is a commitment. And after the first month, the commitment's locked in. So there's a diversity of what people are focused in their own professions. And Marcia, did you want to say something? I saw
Well, I
you.
just want to acknowledge the time. So folks need to go. Please do that. That being said, we'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer questions. And if you are curious about the course and have questions, feel free to schedule a call with Rianne. She'd be thrilled to meet with you. I don't know if you want to speak to anything, Rianne. But just if you go on the website, you'll see it and you can just drop it in the calendar. So if you need to go, please by all means do.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here. Oh, go ahead, Rianne.
I just wanted to say that all the information is really clearly laid out on the website, and Claire's also available for discovery calls. She's based in California, so there's quite a big time zone difference. So we're covering the whole time zone. So whatever is most convenient for you, and love to just connect with you, have the conversation, and find out more about where you are in your facilitation journey.
Mhm. And to answer a couple more questions in the chat that are logistical, we only have one intake every 2 years. This course is offered every 2 years.
Every 2 years,
The
yeah.
next offering will be 2028. And the retreat is optional. The time for the classes is locked in at 7 p.m. South Africa time. So you can do your time zone based on that particular time zone, 7 p.m. South Africa. The group will not be 200 people. It'll probably be,
Yeah.
it's hard to know, somewhere between 15 to 30 on average in terms of attrition. So we do create a cozy group, and our aims at all our courses at Shakti Shiva is to go very deep. So though we're open for anyone to apply, the course might not be the best match for folks who have not done at least some level of introspective, reflective, therapeutic work, because this work will ask you to reflect on self quite a bit, to be willing to grow into your edges and to grow into your discomforts. And so if that's not of interest, the course might not be a fit. But that's where discovery calls with Rianne or with myself come in, so we can help you assess that and get to know you and really make sure that the course will be a match for you. And sadly, the course is not currently accredited in South Africa or any country, but it's a requirement for some of the coursework certifications at Shakti Shiva. But again, there are very few programs on the planet that come at this topic the way that we do, and we stand by that, and we're very proud of it. Maybe one day we can find a way to get accreditation. But what I will say, short of the certificate, which proves one has the cerebral stuff, but really it's the state of your presence and how you move through the world. That is your certificate and how you are able to show up. So the links for the discovery calls will be in the follow-up email. We will absolutely make sure that you have those because we're eager to chat with you. And yeah, I hope we've answered as many questions as we could get to today. It has been a joy to be with you all. And yes, the course is okay for folks who are beginners and who are not currently facilitating. It will be
Yeah.
a little more advanced in that way, but that gives you a lot to grow into. So again, book a discovery call so we can help you make for certain that that's the case, but we'd love to have you. So thank you everyone for being with us. It has been a joy. So good to connect with you. Enjoy your day and embody
Thanks,
self
everybody.
question.
Send us questions if you have them. We would love to answer them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you so much. It
You're
was
welcome.
really, really informative and lovely. I'm actually 90% signing up.
Yes,
Hey,
great.
we'd love to have you, any of you.
Can I say something, or is it are you time
Go
capped?
for it. No, go for
I
it.
have one observation. I was so curious before the call, like how could you possibly manage to do an embodied facilitation course online and have it sort of translate into real life? And you've convinced me in like an hour and a half, and it's actually like fascinating. So very cool. Thank you.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Awesome.
Can't
What
wait
was
to
your
dive in.
takeaway?
And I'll definitely
Yeah.
book a discovery.
Oh, please do. Please do.
My
What was your
takeaway.
experience today and your takeaway?
Mm.
Yeah, how was it possible? What did you experience?
I loved how you said we spread it out over a year so that you can put it into practice in between the modules. That makes a lot of sense. I was a bit worried about not having the in-person until the very end, because I feel like that often brings groups really together. But I guess you have your reasons. I'm curious about the reason.
Rianne can speak to
And
that.
then
Logistical piece. Yeah. Rianne, do you want to speak to that? Why the retreats at the end?
I think there were a number of reasons. The availability of the retreat center, the travel schedule of the facilitators, and also the challenging facilitation scenarios that we start working with from the second half of the course onwards are really necessary before we meet together in person. Marcia, you might have more to say there.
Yeah, we did go back and forth about that, and there were a number of things. I feel strongly too that the people who are able to meet online and can't meet in person also shouldn't be excluded from the experience, and making them kind of slightly separate up things where you can do it and it stands alone and it doesn't feel like you're missing out. But also, if you're like, oh my God, I love this and I really want to do it in person, there's also an opportunity to do that. So having it at the end when it's just this logical extension really makes sense. But we did design the course such that, because not everybody can travel and not everybody has the means to for a million reasons, to be able to go. Time, money, passports, whatever. So yeah, it was really a choice that we did consider integrating it into the in-person, because yeah, there is that thought of we can do it together, but also like that can create separation. So yeah, that's how we decided.
Thank you both for speaking to that. That makes so much sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
Great. Yay. Thanks, everybody.
Cool, cool.
All right.
Have a
Good
great
rest of
See you
day
soon.
the
You
or
too.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
day.